With Terrifier 3 releasing, not only do we have the 3 Terrifier movies, the whole Art the Clown show, the whole thing where these 3 movies are all about him, we also have 3 All Hallows Eve movies, which although started as initially Art the Clown's thing, kind of splintered into being its own franchise. A lot of people don't even know that there is an All Hallows Eve 2 and 3, but there is. I watched them. I even reviewed the second one. I'm going to review the third one in a bit, but this is the ranking, so let's get into it. And at number 6, it's All Hallows Eve 2. I feel like what makes me put this one at the bottom is that this feels like the most cynical of the movies, to be honest. I just find it to be such an awful kind of movie. Although some of the stories in it feel like they had some potential, they generally botch the setup or botch the ending. But that's not even really my main problem with that, besides the fact that I don't really like most of these stories. They just shoehorn it into being part of this franchise in the most lazy way. They show the cover of this kind of with that pumpkin-faced killer, really trying to sell you on the idea that this is a continuation of All Hallows Eve or some kind of sequel to it, but it really isn't. It's just basically a remake with a different killer, the same setup, except they're doing it as a lazy rehash. It really does feel like they just strung together a bunch of random horror clips, whatever, just short films, built this pumpkin face thing around it, but really it's nothing. The pumpkin face killer doesn't have nearly the amount of presence or screen time that Art the Clown does, so it just felt like a lazy gimmick to kind of present the movie in the same way that the first All Hallows Eve did. You have this woman receive the VHS, watch these horror shorts, she gets scared, the pumpkin face killer's face just pops up randomly on the TV, and then he shows up at the end and that's it. You get nothing more from him than that. It was very obviously just to kind of mimic the way that they did things the first time, and for that, you know, it just pisses me off, I'd say, more than number 5 on this list. It just feels damn lazy, and on top of that, it doesn't feel like there was any cohesive thought put into what these short films are. No effort, no thought. It really is just randomly strung together horror shorts. One of them's in Spanish. It's genuinely the most random assortment of them, and for that, it gets kicked to last place. For number 5, All Hallows Eve 3 Trickster. Although I don't think this is a very good movie at all, I do gotta give it the edge over All Hallows Eve 2 because it does have a few more memorable shorts, bits, characters than All Hallows Eve 2, but I still think it's a pretty awful movie that uses the All Hallows Eve name to sell. It just felt like with how popular Terrifier 2 was, how successful it was, it's almost like the ugly long lost relative wanted to cash in on that fame. So they came out with a new All Hallows Eve movie after Terrifier 2. Again, it has nothing to do with Art the Clown, but it's another anthology horror story. I actually like the Pretty Face horror short in this. I feel like that was the best one, kind of the closest that reminded me of that original All Hallows Eve. But other than that, it's just bad acting, random assortment of anthology stories that don't have anything to do with each other. There's no real tying theme throughout any of them. It's pretty low quality, it's pretty bad acting. But I give it slack though because I feel like it had a little bit less cynicism brought towards it than All Hallows Eve 2, despite still using that name, like I said, and coasting off of that, and coasting off of Art the Clown, Damien Leone. But at the same time, like, I don't know, it just feels like it was given less money, definitely more amateur than All Hallows Eve 2, but in a way where it felt like they had more resources, so there's less of an excuse. This had less resources and they tried to do the best that they maybe could have. I don't know. It's still not very good, but there's a few things that give it the edge above the bottom of the list. So at least there's that. Now coming in at number 4, All Hallows Eve. Pretty much from now on, I actually like or love most of these movies coming up. I really dig them overall, and All Hallows Eve is a movie that I really dig overall. What's fun about it too is you get to see Damien Leone's beginnings. This movie was built off of being his original shorts, which he made, he put on YouTube. They got picked up. They gave him some money to do a wraparound with that VHS tape, and then another horror short to kind of give it enough of a runtime. But overall, I really dig this movie, and I think that where most anthology movies falter, if they have kind of one cohesive voice, this one actually kind of thrives in that, and it gives it a through line. I think that's also one of the things that makes it more unique. It's also just, it's something that translates to all of the Terrifier movies, but it has a very grainy quality that's nostalgic, reminds me of movies that I would have grown up getting scared by. So I have a lot of appreciation for that, and it kind of just brings me back. Now with that, you get the introduction of Art the Clown. Although he's not in the entire movie, and the whole movie's not about him in the same way that it it is in Terrifier, it still really gives him time to shine. And, you know, I really see why he broke out as the mainstay after this movie, because he definitely is a standout character. There's a lot that's fascinating about him. There's a lot that's entertaining about him and funny, and he's such a unique character that I see why he spun off, and I'm really glad that he did, because he's become one of my favorite slashers, starring in what is probably my favorite ongoing horror series at the moment. Although there's a few rough edges, you know, this is where he's making his beginnings. The movie was stitched a bit together. It does flow seamlessly, despite art looking a little bit different from certain scenes. And overall, I just have an amount of appreciation for this movie, seeing where this creative team came from. And it's cool to look back on now that Terrifier 2 beat Joker at the box office. It's insane. So, mad props. It's a movie that I really enjoy, and I revisit it quite often on October. Now getting into the official proper Terrifier movies. Number 3 on the list is that original Terrifier. This is a very enjoyable, basic slasher movie, and it's just the perfect way to reel you into the franchise. You don't need to watch All Hallows Eve, where that, you know, it feels more like that was kind of a demo, prototype ideal, showing what he can do with a bit of a budget with this character. And in this, you get the full-on Art the Clown show. You see so much more of him. The whole movie's about him and just his reign of terror on a Halloween night. And it also sets it up perfectly for where the franchise takes it. The way that they establish his character of Vicky, and also just showing what he can do, how vicious he is. The movie's very shocking, surprising. It's one where you stumble on and you're kind of blown away by what they can do with this budget and how this character can really run away with this much fanfare. And that's fanfare that's only grown since this movie came out. You also see that development from All Hallows Eve to this. Really, I've said this a zillion times before, but it does feel like stepping stones. You know, Damien Leone took that stepping stone from All Hallows Eve to this, and then he continues with the franchise, and he just continues to improve, listen to the feedback, figure out what works for audiences, and deliver that to the fans. And that brings me to number 2, the newest Terrifier 3, which, you know, it's kind of a tough situation because I still need a little bit more time to think about this movie. I want to watch it again, see how I feel about it, but at this point I feel comfortable putting it second on the list. I'd say where I think that it's a bit better than Terrifier 1 is that it continues with put the first place contender as first place on this list, but it pulls back a bit, and I'd say that where, although I really enjoy the grounded nature of that first movie, the mysticism, the comic booky nature of the second movie is what draws me more to that. And it feels like Terrifier 3 pulls back a bit on that. It seemed like it was almost not ashamed, but worried of going too far and alienating people, where I would have been fine with them just continuing to embrace that comic booky nature. And don't get me wrong, it's not that it's not part of it. It just feels like it's less of an active part of the story as it was in the second movie. But this movie is the perfect Christmas horror watching. I'm excited to rewatch this on Christmas. It finds so many different ways to just be offensive, mean-spirited, dark, but I feel like they have a good sense of where the line was. But, you know, I love too that they continue to surprise you and keep you on your toes with this franchise. You could have easily been lulled into a sense of knowing what you're getting with these movies, and although you do, they still find ways to surprise you and just keep you guessing because you don't know how far they will go, how mean-spirited and dark they will go. But I think that they make a lot of wise choices in how they present certain things, the context in which they do certain things. I think they do it without going overboard. The whole nature of this franchise is how gratuitous it is. And although it provides that, you still get that story, you get these characters continuing to develop. Sienna continues to be one of the best protagonists, I think, in modern horror. And with that, I'm just happy for that. But getting into number 1, my favorite movie of this franchise, one that I would feel comfortable saying will probably crack into my top 10 horror movies of all time. I just wanted to give it more time. It's still a bit of a newer movie, so I feel weird about it, but it's Terrifier 2. Now, what I love about this movie is that it takes such a comic book approach to the mythology of this franchise. It is a 2-hour, 20-minute, almost slasher horror epic. It just combines genres, themes, ideas, things that resonate with me, that I enjoy so much, and it pulls it all into a movie like this. I love long epics. I love slasher movies. I love 80s slasher movies. I love stories of good and evil. I love comic books. I love comic book movies. And this feels like it brings all that that together, and at the same time as it's having all these terrible, gruesome deaths, it's also streamlining a story with characters you care about, an intrigue that you are actually interested in. So all of that just makes for a movie that I'm just totally fascinated in, totally enthralled by. I love to rewatch it, and it has become one of my favorite movies to talk and speculate about because there's so much fun stuff to speculate about. A lot of breadcrumbs, but at the same time, a lot of mystery. Mystery that's, you know, to a certain degree opened up in Terrifier 3, but there are still a lot of other mysteries to be solved about this franchise, about this character, and about what's really underlying, because there is a good bit of thematic relevance to biblical stories. I just find that stuff so interesting. It really is kind of a more layered movie than most people would have you think. All that to say, it is just a fun-ass slasher movie with Art the Clown. It's a perfect Halloween fall feeling watch because of that setting, feeling. Sienna, of course, like I said, is kick-ass. This is her debut, and I think that they did a great job making you understand this character and really be on her side by the end of this movie, hoping that she does survive, because that is the most important thing that you can do in a slasher movie like this. Not only have you rooting for the fun kills and stuff, but you want those characters that you care about and ultimately pull through for by the end. And all that's to say, this has just become one of my favorite franchises, horror franchises. Very enjoyable. Not much else to say. But let me know what your guys' ranking is in the comments. I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.